यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जना यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय जगन्नाथ बलदेवा जय सुभद्रा नित्य गौर हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय हरे कृष्णा
Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Right. I'll start with the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtham Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Paridhana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishna Bhanu Sutadeve Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhyobhya Evacha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna. So we'll start again with the 7th chapter today. We were discussing verse, we'll have to discuss verse 7.7 today. I'll share my screen in a minute. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you may not be able to see my screen, but I'll recite the verse and you can hear. Okay, actually, I'm at the temple today, so we have some devotees here also. Okay, so let's recite this verse. You can repeat after me. Mattah partaram nanyat.
Mata parataram nanyat.
Kinchid asti dhananjaya.
Kinchid asti dhananjaya.
Mai sarvamidam protam.
Mayi sarvamidam protam.
Sutre manigana iva.
Sutre manigana viva.
Mattah partaram nanyat.
Mata parataram nanyat.
किंचिद अस्ति धनंजय
किञ्चिदस्ति धनञ्जय
मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं
मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं
सूत्रे मणिगण इव
सूत्रे मणिगणा इव
मत्तः परतरं नान्यत्
मतः परतरं नान्यत्
किंचिद अस्ति धनंजय
किञ्चिदस्ति धनञ्जय
मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं
मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं
सूत्रे मणिगण इव.
सूत्रे मणिगणा इव
You want to like to recite?
मतः परतरं नान्यत्
मत्तः परतरं नान्यत्
किञ्चिदस्ति धनञ्जय
किंचिद अस्ति धनंजय
मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं
मयि सर्वमिदं प्रोतं
सूत्रे मणिगणा इव
सूत्रे मणिगण इव. Anyone else? Okay, let's recite the synonyms. Mattah,
मतः
beyond me.
beyond me
Parataram,
परतरं
superior.
superior
Na,
न
not.
not
Anyat kinchit,
अन्यत् किञ्चित्
anything else.
anything else
Asti,
अस्ति
there is.
there is
Dhanamjaya,
धनञ्जय
O conqueror of wealth.
O conqueror of wealth
Mai,
मयि
in me.
in me
Sarvam,
सर्वं
all that be.
all that be
Idam,
idam
which we see.
which we see
Protam,
protam
is strong.
is strong
Sutre,
sutre on a thread
Manigana,
manigana
pearls.
pearls
Iva,
iva
like.
like
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Purport. There is a common controversy over whether the Supreme Absolute Truth is personal or impersonal. As far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, the Absolute Truth is the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. And this is confirmed in every step. In this verse, in particular, it is stressed that the Absolute Truth is a person, that the personality of Godhead is the Supreme Absolute Truth, is also the affirmation of the Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parma Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. That is, the Supreme Absolute Truth personality of Godhead is Lord Krishna, who is the primeval Lord, the reservoir of all pleasure, Govinda, and the eternal form of complete bliss and knowledge. These authorities leave no doubt that the Absolute Truth is the Supreme Person, the cause of all causes. The impersonalist, however, argues on the strength of the Vedic version given in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.10. Tato yad uttarataram tad arupam anamayam ya etad vidur amratash te bhavanti athetare dukkham evapiyanti. In the material world, Brahma, the primeval living entity within the universe, is understood to be the supreme amongst the demigods, human beings and lower animals. But beyond Brahma, there is the transcendence, who has no material form and is free from all material contaminations. Anyone who can know him also becomes transcendental, but those who do not know him suffer the miseries of the material world. The impersonalist puts more stress on the word arupam, but this arupam is not impersonal. It indicates the transcendental form of eternity, bliss and knowledge as described in the Brahma Samhita quoted above. Other verses in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.8 to 9 substantiate this as follows. Vedaham etam purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamsah parastat tam eva vidivati mrityum eti nanya pantha vidyate anyanya. Yasmat param na param asti kinchid yasman nanyo no jayo sti kinchit vriksha eva stabdo divi tishtati ekas tenedam purnam purushena sarvam. I know that's the personality of Godhead who is transcendental to all material conceptions of darkness. Only he who knows him can transcend the bonds of birth and death. there is no way for liberation other than this knowledge of that supreme person. There is no truth superior to that supreme person, because he is the supreme. He is smaller than the smallest, and he is greater than the greatest. He is situated as a silent tree, and he illumines the transcendental sky. And as a tree spreads its root, he spreads his extensive energies. From these verses, one concludes that the supreme absolute truth is the supreme personality of Godhead, who is all pervading by his multi energies, both material and spiritual. नमो विष्णु पदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे. I read the translation one more time. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Hare Krishna. So we are discussing chapter 7th of the Gita. And this chapter, actually, if we remember, it started with Krishna declaring that, Arjuna, you need to make your mind attached to me. Mai asakta manah partha. That's how that was the first line of the verse 7.1. And, how to make your mind attached to me, hear about it from me. So I'll give you that knowledge. So in one sense, we can understand that now Krishna is going to focus on himself. He is going to give his own knowledge to Arjuna. Because when we have to make our mind attached to someone, we have to know about that person. Unless we know about that person, we really cannot make our mind attached to the person. We have the example in Srimad Bhagavatam where Rukmani Devi, just by hearing about Krishna, she became so attracted to Krishna that she said that I'm going to marry only Krishna, no one else. So that hearing is very effective. It's very powerful. So she has not even seen Krishna even once. She has not spoken to him, but yet she became extremely attracted. Now we can say that she is devotee at heart, but still. Now, after speaking this, Krishna started talking about, he glorifies the knowledge first, that this is the knowledge that I'm going to give to you. Jnanam teham sa vijnanam idam vakshyami ashishtaha yagyatva neha bhuyonyach Gyatvayam avashishyate. After knowing this, nothing else will remain for you to know. This is, in one sense, Krishna says this is complete knowledge. And I don't know if you remember, I had mentioned my previous class 7.1 when I was talking about it. I had mentioned that 7th chapter is also very similar to the 9th chapter. The same concepts that are described in the 7th chapter, they are also described in the 9th chapter, but Krishna goes more deeper into the subject matter in the 9th chapter. So if we contrast this with what Krishna says in the 9th chapter, here he is saying that this is complete knowledge. There is nothing more for you to know after knowing this. There he says, Raj Vidya Raj Guhyam. This is the king of all knowledge. So this is the topmost knowledge. That's how Krishna describes there in the 9.2. Then after that, after describing that this is complete knowledge, he also says that this knowledge is actually very rare, extremely rare. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaya yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam vaiti tatvataha. He says that actually very few men endeavor for liberation, and out of those who endeavor for liberation, very few actually know me in truth, tatvataha. So that this word tatvataha is very important here, in a sense that we know about Krishna. Many people have heard about Krishna. They have watched that Little Krishna series, but do they really know Krishna? So that knowing is not actually knowing. Knowing Krishna means to understand the tattva about Krishna, the philosophy, the real truth about Krishna. So this thing is also mentioned in a sense in the 10th chapter, where Krishna says that how rare this knowledge about Krishna is. Now he says, Name vidu surgana prabhavam namarshaya aham adir he deva nam maharshi nam cha sarvasha. Neither the host of the demigods nor the great sages can know me, because in all respects I am the origin of the devatas and even the great rishis. So if the devatas, who are considered to be superior in power, in Kshatriya power, if they cannot know Krishna, and the sages who are like Brahmins, who are learned, who have all the knowledge of the Vedas, if they cannot know Krishna, then how can we know Krishna? So it's very rare in that sense. So after talking this, Krishna starts talking about how. So when he is describing the knowledge about himself, so now we'll see that the sequence that have started from the 7th to chapter 12 is the Bhakti section of the Gita. So we know that Bhagavad Gita talks primarily about 5 subject matters. Talks about Jiva, Ishvara, Prakriti, Kal, and Karma. So these are the 5 subject matters which are talked about in the Gita. So out of which the Jiva is talked about in the 2nd chapter very extensively. The analysis of what is soul and what is matter. Now, that is very extensive analysis done by Krishna in the 2nd chapter. And Karma is talked about by Krishna in the 3rd and 4th chapter. Very extensively he talks about karma, the different types of karmas. Now Krishna is going to focus on Ishvara. Who is Ishvara and what are the characteristics, what are the different strength, different powers, different opulences of Ishvara. So Ishvara so the supreme Ishvara is Krishna himself. And now he's going to talk about himself. So before he talks about himself, he's trying to catch the attention of Arjuna. And then the other 2 subject matters, Prakriti and Kala, they will be described later in detail. So Kala, Krishna doesn't talk about in a lot of detail. He just mentions in 2 verses that time is the controller and time is the destroyer. So it controls and it destroys. And he also mentions that Kal is actually one of my expansions. Kalosmi lokakshay krit pravriddha. That's how he puts it in the 11th chapter. And then the knowledge about Prakriti will come in the 13th through 18th chapters, where Krishna is going to focus a lot about the different gunas, what are the qualities of each guna. So all those knowledge will come later. But now in this section 7 to 12, Krishna is going to focus on himself, on Ishvara. He's describing what is Ishvara. So then he talks about that how he has the different energies. So he talks about earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are my separated energies. Material energy he mentions. And he also talks about his superior energy, which is the spiritual energy. And then he describes that actually all the living beings, they have their source in these 2 natures. So there is no other source. So Krishna describes that he is in one sense source of everything, because the material and spiritual energies come from him, and living entities have their source in these 2 energies. Therefore he ultimately is the source of everything. And now in this verse, in the verse number 7, Mattah Partaram Nanyat Kinchit Asti Dhananjaya, he talks about how he is the topmost. There is no one superior to him. He is the ultimate reality. He is the ultimate absolute truth. So this verse, Mattah Partaram Nanyat Kinchit Asti Dhananjaya, this has actually 2 parts. So first is Mattah Parataram Na Anyat Kinchit Asti Dhananjaya. This is the first part, where Krishna describes that there is no truth superior to me. Kinchit Asti means even slightly, even slightly higher than me. There is no truth superior to me. Now this is a very significant statement that Krishna is making here. So we know that the Mayavadis, they have the idea that the Nirgun Nirakar Brahma is the ultimate reality. And Krishna is actually Saguna Brahma, which is subordinate to the Nirgun Nirakar Brahma. Now this, we can see that it is not supported here. It requires a very arrogant twisting of words to say. So how the Mayavadis put is that, Krishna is actually, when he says that I am the topmost, he is not referring to himself as the person. He is referring to the unborn within himself. Prabhupada also points out in one of the purports. So this requires a very arrogant twisting of the words, that to say that Krishna is subordinate to the Nirgun Nirakar Brahma. Actually, Krishna says the opposite. In the 14th chapter, 27th verse, he says, Brahmano hi pratisthaham. He says actually the Brahman is, I am the basis of that impersonal Brahman. So he is saying the opposite in the 14th chapter. Yet they actually try to twist the words and they try to give a different meaning to what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita. We also see that there is this verse in the 10th chapter, Aham sarvasya prabhumattah sarvam pravartate. I am the source of everything and everything is maintained by me. So Jiva Goswami, who has written Krishna Sandarbha, he writes elaborately about this in the Krishna Sandarbha. He establishes Krishna's supreme position. He gives a parade of verses from different Shrutis and Smritis, including the Vedas and the Upanishads, which describes what is the supreme position of Krishna. And Prabhupada actually takes some of those verses and he quotes those verses in his purport to verse 10.8, Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. So we see that repeatedly Krishna talks about his supreme position in the Bhagavad Gita. Now later Krishna, when Krishna says here that Manushyanam Sahasreshu Kasyid Yatad Siddha, there is, actually very few men can understand me, and then why is it that Krishna says later in the 15th chapter, he describes that, what is that verse I'm trying to remember? In 15.19 and 20, they're very significant verses. Anyway, I'll come to those verses later. But so here we see the other point is the Saguna Brahma. There is no such word mentioned, anywhere in the literature. This Saguna Brahma word, it is like a figment of the imagination of the Mayavadis. They just, this is like a concoction, we could say. So Nirguna Nirakara Brahma is mentioned, and there also we understand that Nirguna is not exactly it doesn't have any qualities. What it means is that it doesn't have any material qualities. So there is a significant difference. Prabhupada also points out the word in one of the verses that he quotes in the purport. He says that the Mayavadis, they focus a lot on the word Arupaya. So Arupaya actually doesn't mean that Krishna or the Supreme Lord, doesn't have any form. It means that he doesn't have any material form. So there is there is also a similar verse that comes in the prayers of Gajendra, where Gajendra says Arupaya Ururupaya. So we'll say that how would Gajendra describe the Lord as Arupaya, that the Lord doesn't have form. But he contrasts this by saying Ururupaya. Ururupaya means one who has many forms. So the point of that verse, I don't exactly remember the whole verse, but the point of that verse is that the Supreme Lord has no material forms, yet he manifests himself in many different forms, Ururupaya. So in the 15th chapter, I was mentioning that Krishna talks about his supreme position again. And it's a very categorical verse. He says, Yomam evam asammuno janati purushottamam sa sarvavid bhajate mam sarva bhavena bharata. The one who knows me to be the ultimate superior truth, undiluted. He actually he knows everything. Sa sarvavid. And what does he do? Bhajate mam. He worships me with all the emotions of his sarva bhavena bharata. And further in 15.20, he says, Iti guhya tamam shastram. This is the most confidential part of the Vedas. So in one sense, this is analogous to what Krishna had said that, neither the hosts of the demigods nor the great sages, they can know me. So iti guhyatamam shastram idam uktam mayanagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat krita krityascha bharata. One who understands this, that Krishna is Purushottama, he is the supreme person, is the supreme enjoyer. He will become wise. Etad buddhva, one who can understand this, he can become wise, and all his endeavors will know perfection. So this first part is very clear in one sense. Mattaha partaram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. That there is no truth superior to me. Now, leaving aside the Brahman controversy, which is there with the Mayavadis, there are also people who say that actually, actually Vishnu is superior to Krishna. Krishna comes through Vishnu. Vishnu doesn't come through Krishna. So their idea is that Vishnu is the supreme and Krishna is like an avatar of Vishnu. And then after the pastimes of Krishna are over, he goes and merges back into the Vishnu Murti. That's how they describe it. Yet we see that Prabhupada also points out the verse that comes in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parma Krishna Sachidanand Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karan Karana. The supreme Ishvara is Krishna only. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also we see that it's mentioned, Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam, Ete Chamsa Kalaha Pumsa, Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam. So all the different manifestations, it gives a list of different incarnations, and after describing all those incarnations, Bhagavatam describes that actually all these incarnations are coming from Avatari, which is Krishna. Krishna is God himself. He is not an avatar, he is the Avatari. He himself is Bhagavan. So in the Bhagavatam it is mentioned, so people talk about Vishnu, but we understand from Srimad Bhagavatam that there is not just one Vishnu in this material world, in this world. There are three different Vishnus which manifest. They are known as the Purusha avatars. So Vishnu in one sense is an avatar of Krishna. So the first Vishnu is actually the Mahavishnu or Karanodakshai Vishnu. The next Vishnu is the Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who lies in the causal ocean. And then finally we have the Kshirodakshai Vishnu. Kshirodakshai Vishnu is the Vishnu who is also the Paramatma in the heart of all living entities in the material world. So I have a representation of, I just show how the expansions look like. So this is the explanations. So there are verses which talk about this. We don't have time to analyze all those verses right now. There in the Rudra Gita section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the 4th canto, 24th chapter, where Lord Shiva also talks about some of this. So the first, expansion of Krishna is Balaram. Balaram expands into first Chaturvyuha, which is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anuruddha. And Balaram also expands into Sadashiv. So there is also a Sadashiv Loka. Sadashiv Loka is also a part of the Vaikuntha planets. So Sadashiv further expands into Shambhu. So I have not displayed that here, but the first quadruple expansion, Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anuruddha. Now there is a purpose for all these expansions, and those purposes are mentioned in the various verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. Very significantly, the first four Chaturvyuha, Lord Shiva talks about it in the Rudra Gita. Then Sankarshan from the first quadruple expands into Narayan. And Narayan further expands in the second Chaturvyuha expansion, which is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Anuruddha again. This is the second Chaturvyuha. And out of this second Chaturvyuha, Sankarshan again expands into Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is also the Karanodakshai Vishnu. From Mahavishnu comes Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and from Garbhodakshai Vishnu comes the Kshirodakshai Vishnu. So this Kshirodakshai Vishnu is actually what people understand to be the Supreme Lord. And I think Jiva Mataji also mentioned once in one of the classes that it is not that Krishna is coming from Vishnu. It is actually, the way to understand this is Krishna comes through Vishnu, not from Vishnu. There's a difference there. Through Vishnu in the sense, because Kshirodakshai Vishnu is in one sense is the in charge of the maintenance of the material world. All the expansions that are coming in the material world, they will come through Vishnu. To give an example, when I first joined my, after graduation, I joined my first company, and after working there for maybe a year, there were bosses and the top bosses and the top bosses, and I used to get when I used to see I was like a new employee at that time. And one day there was our CEO came to the office, and all the top bosses were like, they were like with their hands folded, and they were just, whatever the CEO says, they are ready to do it quickly. And I thought, wow, this person is really, this is the top guy in the company, and everybody is, just behind him. And one day, so this company it also had a group of companies, and there was the MD of the entire group of the companies. So that MD came to visit our office, and this CEO also was, just, so the point is that, the CEO who was considered to be the topmost guy, he also has a boss. And, when the boss comes, the CEO also comes along with him. So the ultimate boss, when he comes, even the CEO of the company has to come along with him too, so that is the point, So when Krishna appears in this world, all the different expansions of Krishna are also present along with him. and they finally come to this material world through Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. So in one sense, we can say that Krishna doesn't come from from Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, he comes through Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. So this is like the explanation of, so if we see, Vishnu is like the seventh expansion of Krishna, and so it's not exactly that Vishnu is supreme. Actually, Krishna is supreme. This is very clearly explained in various verses. So now there is another point which comes up, that okay, this talks about the general Vedic conception that okay, who is supreme, Vishnu or Krishna, or who is is Krishna coming from Brahman or Brahman coming from Krishna. So we discuss those two things. Now there is also the idea about the other religions. Now we see that they don't accept Krishna to be they don't even accept Krishna as God. Forget about who he is supreme or not. So now we understand that the Semitic religions, so the Christianity, Judaism and Islam, so they have their own scriptures, and interestingly we see that in their scriptures there is not much information or conception of God mentioned. If we look at the Bible has two parts. So we have the Old Testament, which is the Bible of the Jews, that is actually known as the Bible. So there we see that there are a lot of stories where the idea is that it doesn't talk about God as a the personality of God is not described, but the idea is that whoever is not obeying God, they are being destroyed. So there is a story of this one city that the city, the residents of that city disobeys God, and they the God, he kind of destroys the whole city in one sense. So the scriptures of the Jews or the Old Testament, it is based very much on the level of fear. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur had described that people approach God in 4 different ways. So fear, desire, duty and love. These are the 4 things or 4 ways in which people approach God. So Old Testament is very much at the level of fear, that if I don't do this, then God will punish me. So that the fear of punishment is there. Then if we talk about the New Testament, again, Jesus gave a lot of teachings, and there are a lot of moral teachings, and there are very good moral teachings in one sense. But again, there is not much knowledge, information about God per se. And the New Testament, it approaches God very much at the level of desire and duty with a hint of love. So they have the prayer, "Oh Father, give us our daily bread." So that is like at the level of duty, because the Father is providing us our daily bread, that's why we should, so that is like duty. Now love, there is also a hint given over there, and we see that our scriptures are prominently based on love, that we should have a very we should have a positive approach, positive relish towards God. So in that sense we should approach God. That's how it is mentioned in the Vedic scriptures. So Prabhupada was very practical in one sense. So Prabhupada have had multiple, I won't say debates, there were debates as well, but he have had multiple discussions with the followers of these Semitic religions. So Prabhupada was asked, so Prabhupada said that actually, so Jesus has said that, I am the Son of God. He was very clear in one sense that I am not the Father, I am the Son of the Father. Father has sent me. So he was very clear. But what happened was, because there was not much conception of God, many Christians, they deified Jesus. Deified in the sense they made the Jesus into a deity. They started worshipping him as the Father himself. Prabhupada pointed it out that Krishna is that Father that Jesus has talked about. Pitahamaste jagato mata dhata pitamaha vedyam pavitram omkara Rig Yajurved, something like there's a verse that comes in the 9th chapter, that I am the father, the mother, and the grandsire of this world. So Prabhupada pointed out that actually Krishna is the ultimate, the supreme father. So so then he was asked a question that if Krishna is the father that Jesus talked about, then why didn't Jesus mention about Krishna specifically? So Prabhupada was quite candid at sometimes, he would say that, we know that Prabhupada at times is also cheeky, in one sense. He will respond according to time, place, and circumstance. So he had said that, Jesus, he said that thou shalt not kill, and he was killed for that. How much practically would have taught, practically speaking. So, but at other times, he also tried to reason with them that, he would say that actually, he would talk about the six opulences of God, all beautiful, all knowledgeable, all strength, all opulence, all renunciate. So these six, he said that now these are the characteristics of God mentioned, in every religion. No religion will say that, my God is ugly. Every religion will say that my God is beautiful. So he will say that, these are the six characteristics which are, in one sense, non-sectarian, and here is the person who fits into all these criteria. If you do not still accept Krishna as God, give us a better conception of God. So, but they couldn't provide any better conception of God because there was no conception of God available. We have this story of Haigriv Prabhu. So Haigriv, I think he became later, he had taken renunciation also, if I'm not wrong. But he was a professor in the Ohio State University, and he was a professor of English. He's the same person who has written the Hare Krishna Explosion. Many of you would have read that book. It's a wonderful book. So he was, so along with teaching English, he was also preaching about Krishna to his students. And some of the Christian students, they complained about him to the principal. So the principal called him in his office and said, I heard that you're talking about God in your classes. So he said that, I didn't know that there is a rule against talking about God in this college. He said, no, that is not the point. You are talking about a very strange conception of God. So he asked the principal, what is your conception of God? So the principal was quiet. He said that if you don't have a conception of God, then how can you say that my conception of God is very strange? So no, that is not the point. You say that God is black. So this was the time when the civil rights movement was going on, black versus whites. He said that no, God is not black, he's blue. So we know that Krishna is blackish blue. That's how his color is described in the scriptures. You say that God is a cowboy. So we know that there's the idea of cowboys who are riding horses and wearing hats. And he said, Haigriv Prabhu said, no, actually, he's not a cowboy, he's a cowherd boy. So the point is that, there is no conception of God mentioned in these scriptures. Now, let me go we don't have much time now. Let me go to the next part of this verse. So this verse has two parts. So the second part of the verse says, Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. No, everything rests upon me, just as the pearls are string on the necklace. Now, when we look at the necklace, what we see is just the pearls. We don't see the underlying thread that is holding onto the necklace. And Krishna is saying that, in this material world, everything rests upon me. So the point is that if the thread is not there, the necklace cannot be there. The pearls, they cannot stay together with each other if the underlying thread is being removed. So that is actually, in one sense, Krishna is saying that I am present in an invisible form. So there is also this verse that comes in the 10th chapter. I believe it's the 39th verse. Yachapi sarva bhutanam bijam tadaham arjuna natadasti vinayatsan maya bhutam characharam. No being can exist without me. Chara or achar, moving or non-moving. Everything, I am bija, I am the source, I am the seed giving father. And I'm also, in one sense, maintaining, I'm the basis of all existence. If Krishna is not there, so Krishna, in one sense, in the 7th chapter, we'll see that Krishna talks about that how is the supreme, how is the essence of everything. He'll say that I'm the taste of the water, I'm the light of the sun and moon. That is like the essence of everything. And then he's also the basis of everything. So it's a very significant, this chapter in that sense. So Mayi Sarvamidam Protam Sutre Manigadaiva. So now we understand that God has two manifestations. One manifestation is the transcendental manifestation, where the God is transcendental to this material world in the sense that he exists beyond the matter, beyond the material world. That is transcendence. But there is also immanence. Immanence means he is also present within the material world, within the. So Vishnu, actually, if you understand what Vishnu means, Vish Anu is like atom. So he is that supreme Lord which is present in all the different atoms of this material world. So in that sense, this definition of Vishnu is quite non-sectarian, So now Islam, they have the idea that God, he is so pure, is so lofty, and this material world is so filthy, so bad, so sinful, that God cannot be, there is no contact of God with this material world. The only contact of God with this material world is the revelation of Quran that happened through the Prophet of God, Prophet Muhammad. That is their idea. So, but here we understand that Krishna is saying that, I am present in this and everything rests upon me. So God is the source and he is also the maintainer of everything. There are three different philosophies. We have theism. Theism means, God is the source of the universe and he's also the maintainer of the universe. Then we have the philosophy of atheism. Atheism says that God is neither the source nor the maintainer. God doesn't exist only. That is atheism. There is also an in-between philosophy. In between philosophies, deism, D-E-I-S-M. Deism, it says that actually God is the creator of this world, but he is not the maintainer of this world. So their idea is, they give the analogy of a clock, that, okay, the clock, if we look at the clock here, so clock has different parts and the clock has to work. The battery has to be put in the clock. And then when the battery is there, the hands will move in different directions, So in one sense, there has to be a creator for that clock, but the creator have made the clock in such a way that there is no intervention needed from the creator after the clock has been manufactured. So their idea is that, yes, God is the creator, but once the universe was created, now there is no need for God to intervene here. Everything works works automatically because that's how the world has been designed. So that is deism. But we see that Bhagavad Gita doesn't support deism and atheism. It only talks about theism. Theism is, God is also the creator. God is also the maintainer of this world. Aham sarvasya prabha mattah sarvam pravartate. Everything comes from me and everything is maintained by me. Krishna will say that later. So the conception of God as it exists in the Vedic literature, that conception of God is not present anywhere else, in none of the religions. Prabhupada would also argue with the Semitic religions whenever he would have a interaction or debate and he was challenged that how could Krishna be God. So Prabhupada would say, he would ask them, what is the conception of God that is mentioned in your religions? And there's no conception. They would not be able to describe how does God look, what does he do in the in the spiritual world. They understand that, okay, God is transcendental, but what exactly he does over there? In the Quran, we see that there is a description of 7 Jannats. So he says there are 7 Jannats that are there, and Allah's Jannat is beyond that 7 Jannat. That's how it is described. Now, in one sense, it is analogous with what we have in the Vedic religion, Vedic tradition. We understand that there are 7. So we have the 14 planetary systems, and there are 7 planetary systems above Earth. And beyond that, beyond the Satyaloka, is the abode of God, the Vaikuntha as we know it. So, but that's about it. In the Quran, there is no mention about what exactly does God do in Jannat. There's no idea about it. They understand that God is a person because he lives, in a Jannat which is 7 Jannats above, where they are currently. But But really, that's about it. There is no other description mentioned over there. So Prabhupada would say that if there is no conception of God mentioned in your religion, and here we have the conception of God available, why don't you take this knowledge, why don't you accept this knowledge and become better devotees of God, become better lovers of God? He very famously, Prabhupada gave the definition of religion. He said that the religion is meant to develop love for God, and as far as it is helping its followers to develop love of God, that religion is authentic, that religion is successful. But if we say that, okay, I will only accept what is mentioned in my religion, I will not accept anything else that is not mentioned in my religion, then we have to ask, Prabhupada would say, are you interested in God or are you interested in religion? So it is like, say for example, there is a student who is in Cornell University, who is doing a bachelor's in computer science, and he wants to grow further in the area of computer science. And there is the best knowledge about computer science is given in MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he would say that, no, if I take knowledge from MIT, then I will not be faithful to Cornell University. So therefore, I will not go there. So then we have to ask, are you interested in college or are you interested in knowledge? So that's exactly the point. Rupa Goswami gives a principle which he quotes from Padma Puran. He says, "Yena kena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayet." By this way or that way, by any way, I have to make my mind attracted to Krishna. I have to make my mind attached to Krishna. So wherever knowledge about God is available, we take that knowledge and we increase our devotion to God. So that is the key. So Prabhupada would point it out to them that if there is no conception of God available in your religion, why don't you accept this conception that is available, which also matches with what is available in your religion? So there are tenets mentioned, there are epithets mentioned. In the Bible, it is mentioned that God is the Alpha and Omega. And here also in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "Aham adischa madhyamscha bhutanam anta evacha." I am the beginning and the end, and the middle of the, so bhutanam anta evacha. So the same epithets, the same tenets, the same principles which are there in the other religions, that they are also mentioned in the Vedic religion. But here we also have much more available. The identity of God as a person, who God is, where does he live, what does he do, what relationship he share with other living entities. All that information is available in great detail. So I think I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, comments, or corrections about what I said today. Any questions, any corrections, any comments, any realizations?
Mentioned about Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. Where did you hear that?
Where did I hear that, Mataji?
Yeah.
The Nirgun, so Sagun Brahman, as I was saying, it is not mentioned anywhere. Nirgun Brahman is mentioned. So you are asking, where is it mentioned? It is mentioned in different Upanishads. It is mentioned about Nirgun Brahman, but you will not find any word which says Saguna Brahman. There is no word that says Saguna Brahman. Brahman is always described as Nirgun in the Vedic literature. It is mentioned in various, I don't have the exact references now, but in many different Upanishads, the Upanishads generally focuses on the Brahman aspect.
I mean, I heard a song by, I forget if it's Namdev or Tukaram, Marathi Abang, that Tuja Saguna Manoki Nirguna. Krishna himself is referred to as Nirguna, meaning to say that he's doesn't have the three material gunas,
Right. No,
and
exactly.
and that is Saguna, means he has all perfect qualities, So Krishna himself is referred to as Nirguna and Saguna, but I'd never heard of Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. So
it may be mentioned in a bhajan, but the point is that in the Vedic literature, in the verses of directly of Upanishads or any of the Puranas, you will not find the word Saguna. So You are
Yeah, I
right.
mean, Saguna Brahman doesn't even make sense. You know
Exactly.
what I'm
Right.
saying?
No, their idea is that, what they say is that the Nirgun Nirakar Brahman, when it comes in the contact with the material mode of goodness, then it comes down as a avatar, which is a Sagud Brahman, because it has become contaminated by guna of the good. So they understand guna to be
Material Guna, yeah.
material guna. It's like a impurity, so when that impurity of material mode of goodness, it interacts with Nirgun
Right.
Nirakar Brahman,
But referring to Krishna himself as Nirguna and Saguna makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, right.
Because I never understood it when I was younger. I've said, how can you call Krishna Nirguna? But now I understand it as free of the material gunas, But in fact, I think Tukaram or Namdev says, "Tuja saguna mano ki nirguna." What do I call you? Do I call you nirguna? Do I call saguna? And he says saguna nirguna eko govindure. He says like both are govinda.
Right.
So in that sense, it makes sense. But in terms of Brahman, it doesn't really make sense at all.
Right. So, as you said, the point of that is Krishna has no material qualities. He has no material form. He has no material qualities. Everything is spiritual about Krishna. That's the point.
Right. Maybe Nirguna Brahman kind of makes sense because it doesn't have the three. Brahman itself is also transcendental and doesn't have the three material gunas, right? You could say.
Yeah. But we also see that in the Hari Namamrit Vyakaran of Jiva Goswami. So he gives the three genders. So he says that, okay, so he is the Narayan Ling, the Lakshmi Ling, and the Brahman Ling. So Brahman Ling is like the neuter, he says. Narayan Ling is the Purusha, is the male gender. Lakshmi Linga is the female. So neuter is what he says as Brahman. So in that sense, we say that Brahman is not, it's not that Brahman is doing something. Brahman is not doing anything. And you are right that there are also qualities. When the Mayavadis say that Brahman has no qualities, yet they describe Brahman in different ways. So if there is no qualities, how can you even describe that thing? If something has no attributes, no qualities, how can you actually describe that? So, but they do have a lot of this. They have to say a lot about Brahman. So in that sense, we can say that even Brahman may have certain spiritual qualities. But the idea is that the Brahman is not doing anything.
So then, if that's the case, then I guess when you're saying Nirguna, you're talking about material.
Right. The guna refers to the material mode of material mode.
Right. The tamas, sattvic, and rajas guna is what they're talking about when
So
they
when we say nirguna, that actually refers to that there are no material impurities, no material contamination, no material gunas that are there.
So in that sense, even Brahman could be qualified as nirguna, right?
Exactly. It is in that sense that it has no material qualities.
Material qualities, yeah. But it cannot be qualified as saguna because it doesn't have all the perfect 64 qualities.
Right. And we accept that Brahman is there, but Brahman is not the source of Krishna. Brahman is
the effulgence, yeah.
Effulgence, yeah. So Brahmano hi pratisthaham, that's how Krishna puts it. So he acknowledges that there is Brahman, but he doesn't say that I am coming down from Brahman, and Brahman is the source of everything. He says I am the source of everything, and Brahmano hi pratisthaham, Brahman is actually I am the basis of the Brahman. Yeah. Mari, you would like to add anything? Okay, any other questions or any other comments or any realizations?
The examples that you provided to make us understand was really awesome, and today's class was so interesting.
Thank you, Mataji. So I wanted to actually read the purport to 10.8, but we don't have much time left. So in verse 10 point in the purport, Prabhupada gives some verses from the different scriptures which describes Krishna's position, as the supreme person. But maybe some other time we can read that. So there are no other comments or questions. Maybe we can stop here. Pitamala Mataji, it's good to have you back. Classes were very silent without you. So
Yeah,
it's-
Mataji, even your questions, your comments make us think, and it makes the session lively,
You,
I make
you mean
you-
to say my loud mouth is back? Okay.
No. We meant in a positive way. Right. Vancha kalpatarubhyas.
Kalpatarubhyascha च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। कोटि वैष्णवंत की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। गणपति गोविंद प्रभु की जय। Hare Krishna, everyone.